All right, so the news is pretty much the same. It's same old at this point. All the same stuff's happening over and over again. Canada is up to 101,369 cases, 8431 dead, 32 new cases. So we are down a little bit in that department. 542, we are up a little bit in the active cases department. 32 in the hospital, so we're down there. Um, I see all these people from Edmonton that are all worried that this is a terrible second wave, even though there's really no evidence of it. The increase in cases is pretty much exclusively due to the increase in testing. Again, it coincides very closely to when the government allowed just anybody who wanted to go get a test to get a test. The cases went up shortly after that. So that's more of the explaining, and people are blaming the protests. Again, I don't even think that that's probably responsible for some of it, but a very small amount and not something we should be even close to being worried about. And as far as the whole second wave goes and closing, reclosing, I see people talking about that, people that are all paranoid. Again, nothing is going to change their mind. We could have one new case every day for the next 3 4 months and they would still be as paranoid as they are today. But as far as that goes, we need at least, 100, probably 150 to 200 new cases a day to be worried, for the simple reason that, we've radically increased our testing amount. We were having this many new cases, late March, about 3 months ago, and we were testing like 3 times less people. So again, we're having the equivalent to like 10 new cases a day as far as March standards go. Nobody can possibly argue that that's something that you could possibly even think about being worried about. And the other thing, again, I've mentioned, but Saskatchewan, Manitoba, both, I believe, fully reopened now. Again, no issues there. I mean, they did have a little bit of spikes here and there, but nothing even close to something you have to worry about. The new cases in Ontario have been, I believe yesterday was over 200, but pretty well every other day for the last 10 days has been below 200. So their numbers are down. Quebec's numbers are down. So again, it's largely the increase in cases is largely due to the fact that we're clearly just discovering more asymptomatic cases. And another way of showing that is, again, the amount of new cases per day in the States has gone up over the last few 3 or 4 days, but the daily new deaths hasn't. The daily new deaths have actually gone down. I mean, they've had the last 2 days have been the lowest days since literally like the third week of March, like literally the third week of March. So there's been, an extra 5,000, 5 to 10,000 cases a day in the States, but the daily new deaths are going down, which again, it just is definitive, example or proof that they're just discovering more asymptomatic cases. It's nothing we need to worry about. The only way that we would need to worry, and the only way that I would be wrong, or I mean, I would probably just say it, but the only way that I would be wrong on the topic is if the hospitalization numbers and the deaths trend up rather, drastically. And it doesn't just be just a little bit. If they go from having, if you go from having 100 deaths a day and you go to 150, that's not something you had to worry about. I mean, they had, from the second week of April through like the second week of May, they were having like 1 to 2,000 deaths a day. So again, they would need to be much higher than that for it to be something to worry about. And again, um, people say, oh, 1 to 2,000 per day, that's a ton of people. Well, what we don't realize is that I mean, the state of California has more people die per day than that amount. So yeah, is it a lot of people? But is it a lot of people compared to the amount of people that are dying from other things? Like not even close. Like it's a blip on the radar compared to some other things. So yeah, that is that. The big stuff in the news nowadays is all this racist, race baiting garbage from the mainstream media and from the left and Black Lives Matter. And this is from Zuby Music, again, a very articulate guy that I really like seeing some of his stuff. He says, I hate the fact that so many people think being racist against white people is perfectly acceptable. I can't get my head around the stupidity and hypocrisy. If racism is wrong, then it's wrong. Period. No exceptions. Stop being buttheads. No, again, they justify it in that, oh, we're just evening the odds or evening the score. The problem is that it's the classic pendulum swinging back and forth situation. You can quote unquote even the odds if that's what you think, and by you I'm talking about the Black Lives Matter and the race baiters of the world. The problem is that it's going to come back to bite you in the butt, and it's probably going to come back to bite you in the butt even harder than it did the first time. So that's the problem, is that if you want to, again, Morgan Freeman, I think was, I don't know if it was him, but he put it in a good way. It's that, well, how do you think we should end racism? Well, it's stop talking about it. Like, the problem is that racism objectively is not a big issue in society. It objectively just flat out isn't. The numbers clearly bear that out, especially racism against blacks. In the past, yeah, but now, no. The blacks are far more likely to commit hate crimes against other races than other races are against blacks, even though blacks are a much lower percent of the population, especially compared to whites. So that's just pretty well definitive proof that the whole idea of racism disproportionately negatively affecting blacks is flat out not true. The numbers don't bear that out. And the fact that so many people are pretending that that's not the case really astounds me. A lot of the white people, I think it's just they don't want to be called racist, so they go along with it, which I think is a terrible way of going about it, because if you just flat out go along with the mob, eventually the mob will come for you. Eventually the mob literally will come for you, so you might as well just stand on principle now rather than later, because at least if you do it now, you know where you stand and you can recover easier from it. So this is from Breaking 911, and 70 people shot, 9 fatally so far this weekend in Chicago. That was on Sunday. And again, where is the Black Lives Matter on this? Where is the Black Lives Matter? Again, this is the problem with Black Lives Matter. I've been pointing out ad nauseum, but again, there's a lot of people that still go along with their garbage. They don't care about Black lives. Again, they care about Black lives when whites are the oppressor. Again, if blacks are again, the overwhelming majority of blacks that are killed in the states are by other blacks. It's like the same thing with the natives in Canada. Like you have all these people talking about the whole, oh, where's this the investigation into the missing and murdered indigenous women, even though the majority of those were killed by other indigenous men. So not that that's the exact same thing. That's a little bit different of an issue. There's different history around it. But again, the point being is that the overwhelming majority of blacks are killed by other blacks. So if you care so much about black lives, then the black population, you got to look yourself in the mirror. You don't blame whites when whites are way less likely, including police officers, to kill you than other races are. So yeah, that's the point being, is that I really don't understand why so many people can ignore this. Now, again, Black Lives Matter is a far left communist Marxist organization. They've had members admit that. You know, one of the top Black Lives Matter people is a convicted cop killer. Like, again, like, and this is the problem too, is that they refuse to distinguish between peaceful and violent. Like, this is like, it's not going to end well. It's not going to end well. If you need to commit violence to get your way, at least when it comes to stuff like this, it's not going to end well for you or for the other people, because eventually the other side's going to say, "Hey, I'm tired of this," and then it's going to be all out war, and you're going to lose. And by you're going to lose, I mean the Black Lives Matter people are going to lose, because eventually the problem is that their solution to fix the quote unquote problem is not going to fix the problem. If anything, it's only going to make it worse. And when they realize that, they're just going to turn around and blame Whitey again. And the cycle repeats until eventually so much tension boils over and there's a literal civil war or something along the lines of that that goes on to end it. And the problem with that is that they're not going to win. And even if they do win, it's going to be terrible. I mean, you're going to have a South Africa situation going on, maybe. The difference there is that blacks are the majority, but it's we're headed down a very dark path. And until people just flat out admit reality that yes, racism exists to some degree, but the overwhelming majority of the problems facing the black community are because of the welfare state and because of their own terrible doings. Again, the overwhelming majority of blacks killed by other blacks, and you can't blame racism. Again, their excuse for all of this is to turn around and blame racism. Oh, it's not welfare's fault; it's racism. It's not single parenthood's fault; it's racism. It's the reason I didn't graduate high school is racism. Well, that's not a good argument. It's flat out not true, because There was more, again, objectively, there was far more racism, in the 1920s, 30s, 40s. But blacks, objectively, they stayed married, they graduated high school more, they ended up in prison less likely, and no one can possibly argue that there was more racism today than there was back then, because back then there was objectively racist laws on the books. So it is not racism, at least the majority of the cause of the pain and suffering of the black community is not racism. That is objectively true. There is no debating that. Does racism come into play a little bit? Yeah, but it's not significant. It's not significant. And this is from Island Man on Twitter, and he had a tweet that went very viral about a week ago. Anyway, he says, I saw BLM, and again, speaking of BLM, donated money to Planned Parenthood today. Planned Parenthood has killed more black people than the Civil War, cops, or any war we had. So to me, BLM is a fraud and a joke. And again, this is exactly what I've been talking about. Um, you'll point again. One of the main things that I always point out to people, and that I always say, oh yeah, they're political cause, they're a political organization. They don't care about justice. They don't care about any of that stuff. And all the useful idiots always, oh no, they're not political. They just care about Black lives. And if you cared about Black lives, you wouldn't donate money to Planned Parenthood, regardless of your view on abortion. Planned Parenthood is a political organization. Again, 99% of their support comes from one side, therefore, they're a political organization. They donate a lot of money to Democrats. Again, the Black Lives Matter raised a ton of money. A lot of it ended up in the hands of an organization that donates money to Democrats. Again, they are a political movement. Anybody who is not on the left, who supports Black Lives Matter, you are an idiot. You are being played, and you're literally supporting the own demise of your political beliefs. So you might as well just flat out go vote against the opposite against what you believe, because that's basically what you're doing by not speaking up on this. Another thing from Zuby Music here again, very good guy. The social justice warriors of the past fought for liberty, desegregation, suffrage, anti-violence, and equal rights under the law. Today's social justice warriors fight for compelled pronouns, censorship, removing TV shows, and syrup. It's a mockery to compare them, and again, it is a mockery. And they're not today's social. They're not fighting for social justice. They're literally communists who want communism, and they'll stop at nothing to do that. They will do whatever it takes to do that. There's not a whole lot to go over as far as this goes, but and they didn't even really call themselves social justice warriors in the past, really, at least not that I'm aware of. So I mean, comparing them just based off that is flat out wrong, and it's also flat out wrong in that they fought for literally the opposite. It's like the Antifa people comparing themselves to the soldiers on D-Day. Like, you couldn't be anything further from the truth. Number one, Antifa is an anti-fascist. The better way of putting it is pro-communist. Just because you call yourself something doesn't mean anything. And the fact that so many people literally believe that is insane. Like, imagine if Trump changed his, or the Republicans under Trump changed their names to the anti-racist party. Would that magically make them anti-racist? Well, no, not in the left side. So again, the fact that just because you call yourself something doesn't mean anything. But again, the Antifa fights for and they're pretty much the epitome of the modern social justice warrior. They fight for anti-free speech. They're for gun rights as long as it's for them. They're anti-gun rights when it's for people they disagree with them. They're for book burning. They're for all the same stuff as the literal fascists did. Like, again, the Nazis book burning. They're the same people that want censorship on. Again, modern day book burning is banning people from social media, because hardly anyone actually writes physical books anymore. I mean, or at least people still do, but the modern day town square is YouTube, is Twitter, is Facebook, is these kind of places. It's no longer books and like encyclopedias and crap like that. So if you're for banning people who disagree with you politically, regardless of their views, because nobody they ban, at least that I'm aware of, has had a legitimate reason to be banned. They ban them because they're the most edgy people, like the Alex Joneses of the world. They're the most edgy. Therefore, yeah, because they're so edgy, we can ban them. And then, but when they ban the people that are the most edgy, they go after the next most edgy group, and they keep going and going and going until there's nobody left. Like, there's no. And again, I mean, I hate to use this example because I don't like the guy that much, but Ben Shapiro. They want to ban Ben Shapiro because they think he's a Nazi, even though he's literally a Jew. Like he's literally a Jew, and yet they think he's a Nazi. Like, come on, people. They accuse Candace Owens of being a white supremacist, even though she's black. Like again, these people are beyond insane. Like so insane, it's not even funny. But anyway, the last thing I wanted to talk about is something again that's been in the news over the last couple of weeks. But Marwan Tabara, Liberal MP, was arrested over Easter. Did some pretty bad stuff. Probably going to go to jail. And the problem is that the Liberal Party had been warned multiple times about this guy's misconduct. I mean, at that those times they were allegations, but again, the Liberals tend to be in the believe all women camp. And again, this is the problem: is that when believe all women benefits them, then they're all for it. But when believe all women doesn't benefit them, then they're all against it. Again, look at the Joe Biden thing and the Kavanaugh thing. You know, the Biden allegations objectively are far more credible. I'm not even saying whether or not I believe them. I still think there's some holes in the case against Biden, but at the very least, there's corroborating evidence that proves the Biden allegations, at least to some degree. And there's no evidence whatsoever as far as the Kavanaugh allegations go, but the Kavanaugh allegations were taken far more seriously. So yeah, this is the problem: is that it's literal blatant hypocrisy, and this is why, again, even though I largely don't support either side, I mean, it depends. If we can get a true conservative, I would tacitly support them. Um, but the difference here is that the blatant hypocrisy, like even Andrew Scheer, who is the most milk toast centrist conservative you can possibly think of, if something like this came out against him, um, it would be the biggest news in Canada. I mean, COVID would be an afterthought. Racism would be an afterthought. CBC would be talking about it 24/7. Even like a mid-level, conservative who's more milk toast. Like I mean, this Tabara guy wasn't a high level Liberal MP, but this is the difference. It's just the blatant hypocrisy that I wanted to point out, and this is why the crowd that they're all the same. You know, Liberals and Conservatives they're all the same. And this usually comes from the more libertarian, the PPC, Wexit kind of people. At least not all of them. They're just more likely. And not that I disagree with those people. I agree with them more than I agree with anyone else. But this is the thing that I really think that they're wrong about, is that they think that, oh, they're all the same. When in reality, they're not. The left is absolutely pitiful, and the right is just bad. Like the right is just bad. They're not. They're if they got a little bit better, they would be worth voting for. Not that again that they're perfect, but they would still be worth voting for compared to the Liberals or the NDP. The Liberals and the NDP are absolute and utter garbage. Absolute and utter garbage. So anyway, again, I just wanted to bring that up because I hadn't brought it up yet. So anyway, if you like the video, make sure to hit that like and subscribe. Check out my PayPal and email. I got linked in the description. Again, appreciate any donations with the very least. Just hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. And last couple things, check me out on Twitter if you haven't already. Check me out on BitChute. All the links are in the description, so you can find them all there.